meeting of Cheltenham Borough Council's Cabinet. We've got a few decisions to make. The meeting's been streamed live to the Cheltenham Borough Council YouTube channel, and the recording of the meeting will be held for the next 4 years. We don't have any members of the public here with us present today, but welcome to anybody who might be watching the meeting on YouTube. And the last bit of that is to please note a fire alarm test is not expected, so if the alarm does sound, you should immediately make your way to the nearest fire exit. I've got apologies tonight from Councillor Collins. Otherwise, we're all here and present. The next section is declarations of interest. Have any members got a declaration they need to make?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I have a pecuniary interest in item 8, and the nature of that is clear from my published register of members' interests. So I will be withdrawing at that point and returning after that item is concluded.
Thank you, duly noted. Minutes of the last meeting, which you will find in the reports on pages 5 to 16. Have any members got any questions or comments that they wish, or amendments that they wish to make to those minutes? If not, can I see a show of hand to approve those minutes, please? Thank you. I've just realised we're missing Flo. She's just coming. Right.
I thought we were in full place.
So we don't have any public questions tonight, but we do have one member question from Councillor Willingham, and that question was put to Councillor Clucas. The response has been published. Councillor Willingham is not here tonight, so there is no supplementary, and Councillor Clucas has offered to meet with him to take things forward if there's any more that we can do on that subject. So we've got no items referred to us by Council, Overview and Scrutiny, or any of the other committees. And that takes us on to the Cabinet Member reports and or officers, or I think actually today it's all member reports. The first one is agenda item 5, which is the Gloucestershire City Region Board, which is the report of myself. So it's quite detailed, and there's been an awful lot of work that has gone into this collaboratively with all of the other districts. And rather than this being so, over a number of years, Gloucestershire local authorities have worked jointly together through the membership of several boards, such as the Severn Vale, the Roaring Ambitions and Central Gloucestershire City and the Gloucestershire City Region, together with the Gloucestershire I always hate this one. I always feel it's such a tongue twister. The Economic Growth Joint Committee, or otherwise known as GJEC. And we've done that for several years. Following the review of the joint working arrangements, Leadership Gloucestershire agreed that the 3 boards and the joint committees should be merged into a single forum under the name of Gloucestershire City Region Board, serving the whole of the county. And this report sets out the emerging form and the functions of what will be known as the Gloucestershire City Region Board, and the nature of its authority and the terms of reference, membership and joint scrutiny arrangements are all set out in this report. Members will recall that the Gloucestershire local authorities established the business rates pool, which enabled part of the pool to create the Strategic Economic Development Fund, otherwise known as SEDEF. And the former GJEC administered the fund through an approved eligibility and project approval process in November 2018. At GJEC's final meeting in September last year, members welcomed the reported growth of the business rates pool and fund, and GJEC asked whether a more strategic approach could be taken when considering the allocation of SEDEF funding. The fund operated under GJEC on an ad hoc approach on a first-come, first-served basis, and GJEC noted that the projects are not always strategic in nature, which risks funding being allocated to projects that may not maximise economic benefit and growth to the whole of the county. So the proposal is for the board to administer the new board, or evolved board really. It's actually because there was a lot of duplication in having several different boards that were all the same people sitting around the table, all feeding in. So it made a lot of sense to actually all come together and have a much larger group of people that are all working together at just one meeting instead of 3 or 4. So the proposal is for the board will administer the SEDEF, and this will enable the board to reconsider the approach to the allocation of bids by developing a longer vision and a portfolio approach to assessing funding bids that are coming forward in the pipeline. And this will enable the board to apply a more rigorous selection of projects that would deliver and add value in supporting the growth of the local economy through a more strategic approach. Yet there's not an organisation across the county that doesn't actually agree with us that the Golden Valley is our future, and we've benefited financially from that SEDEF, but it'll be good to have it with a more strategic view as to how things come forward and when they come forward, and with that rationale of having the more strategic approach to it that benefits the entire county. So the county councils, you know, it's important that, of course, there is oversight of of that board, and the County Council's GJEC Scrutiny Committee that's in existence will be reconstituted and reviewed to be refocused on having oversight of the Gloucestershire, of the GCRB. This will potentially include monitoring the delivery of the projects as well, which will be a good positive thing that, again, it shows the public how the money is being spent and how those projects are delivering for the county. This will be potentially include, as I said, the monitoring and the delivery of the projects that have received investment from the Strategic Economic Development Fund, so that's the SEDEF, or making suggestions to the City Region Board on potential areas of future investment of the fund. It didn't make any sense to retain all of those, as I said, because of the significant duplication. It's a very detailed report, and I'm very grateful to Gareth, who's put this together, and we have the support of all the other districts as well to take this forward. But it's important to note that none of this will come into being until each of the authorities, and each of us will have an equal vote around that table. I think that's all I want to say on the report, but I'm happy to take any comments or questions that anybody's got. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Leader. Broadly, I think this is a useful evolution of what already exists, but there are some pitfalls which I think we would all agree we need to beware in these kind of processes. When we're working across district borders and with county, there are always things that could go wrong, and negotiations to get the best outcomes for the whole county, but for Cheltenham, will be really important. When I was reading the papers, I was broadly feeling quite positive about it all, and there are some important things that we can look at as Liberals and think this is a good idea. So, for example, there are references to devolution to Gloucestershire from Westminster, and that is a positive, and it's welcome. But we've got to hope that this also is followed with more resources, the money that we need to do the work when the devolution has happened. And also, you know, we need to be aware of what's happened in the past when these kind of devolution deals have come into being, or new bodies have been formed in our county. In the past, sometimes they've been used as a veil for cuts, and I think we do need to be wary of that. I remember that while austerity was at some of its deepest moments, LEPs were unveiled, for example. And there was all this, there was a lot of talk about how LEPs across the country were to be given tens of millions of pounds to deliver local economic growth for their areas. And of course, they were, but at the same time, even more money was being taken away from districts and counties and unitaries across the country in those areas where the LEPs were being set up. And of course, as Liberals, we must also be wary of the points around accountability and scrutiny, because concentrations of power like that must always be open to proper scrutiny. But I think we also need to be mindful of the risk, while powers are being drawn down from Westminster, of powers being drawn up from Cheltenham to Gloucestershire. And of course, we already share sovereignty on a number of things. The SLP, for example, the Strategic Local Plan, where we work really positively and closely with Tewkesbury and Gloucester. When we're working with 3 more partners at district level and another at county level, I think we also need to be wary of the potential for difficulties that will arise there, but also if we're thinking about how the voice of the person in St Mark's or the voice of the person in Charlton Kings is thinking about how they can hold to account those who are making decisions at this new county level body, it becomes quite complex. And I'm sure our leader, as a good Liberal, will be in the room making the case for all of Cheltenham's communities, but we will always need to be wary of the fact that our local residents are the people who we need to be listening to first. So just to, to put it into broad terms, if I live in the middle of Fairview and I don't like a decision that's being made by this new county level body, who do I hold accountable? Do I go to my local borough councillor? Do I go to my local county councillor? Do I go direct to the senior officers group? Do I go to the leader of the council in the case of Cheltenham or wherever? So there are all of these issues around scrutiny and accountability that I think we all need to be wary of when we're going into these kind of processes. The appendix tells us that the board will work on a Gloucestershire City Region vision. Again, I think that's a positive thing because we all know that we've got to work with the other districts in the county. However, some of us will remember a few years back where we had the Gloucestershire 2050 vision, which came forward. And it's fair to say there was some ambitious big picture thinking as part of that 2050 vision. And some of it was really positive. There was some really positive points about how we provide houses in the right areas, although, of course, we will all be somewhat sceptical about the convergence of Cheltenham and Gloucester, for example. We know that that is not a popular thing either in Cheltenham or Gloucester, and certainly in between. But also the attempts to talk about how we can make better progress on environmental matters, which are key across this county. That's the kind of thing where I think there was a positive discussion that was started as part of the 2050 vision. However, it wasn't communicated in the most sensitive possible way at that time, and I do recall a member of this authority at the time saying, I'll be 112 years old when this comes into being, and I fully intend to be here to put a stop to it. Now, I wouldn't expect that something that comes forward next time would be quite so divisive, and I'm sure our leader will be going into bat for Cheltenham with an eye on those kind of pitfalls. But I think better management of that process when the Gloucestershire vision does come forward for the City Region Board is going to be really important. And if we look at some of the other combined authorities around the country that have come up with some interesting schemes, we've seen in some areas a regional mayor decide that he was going to sort of take part in a land grab to fund a multi-billion-pound tram scheme, and he was asking the government to devolve powers around land value taxation in order to fund this. It was extremely unpopular, and of course it just wasted several years in that part of the country. And I would like to think that through the process that was being put together, Gloucestershire, with Cheltenham's voice as part of it, won't make similar mistakes. As much as we all might like to talk about future to do with trams, Councillor Horwood. But we also got to be really, really wary of one particular point, and that is a drive towards dangerous deregulation. It's not long ago that in this county, led by the County Council and driven by the government of Liz Truss, there was an attempt to force upon Cheltenham investment zones. And that would have been a dangerous threat to the environmental well-being of Cheltenham, but also a threat to the key project that this council is undertaking in the Golden Valley development. And I do think we need to be aware that while we are joining this new group, it is not used as any kind of stalking horse or Trojan horse or whatever you want to call it in a clunky metaphor kind of way for that kind of agenda, because I don't think that will go down very well with the people of Cheltenham or all the people across the rest of Gloucestershire. So I trust that those lessons that I've referenced in my short speech there have been learned from the past, and we won't be going down those paths again. But as I said, this is a positive thing, and working across county and with the other districts is something that we clearly need to do to solve those goals around economy and environment and much more. Sorry for speaking so long. I don't usually bother speaking that long in Cabinet, but I've not got long left on this council, so I thought I'd put my 2 pence in.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson, and you made some very good points. Councillor Horwood.
It's very good to follow Councillor Wilkinson on this, and when he gets to a different set of green benches, I hope before too long you'll discover there's a clock that ticks down on, on speeches like that. But that was, he made some very important contributions. Leader, I just wanted to make an intervention just to say thank you to you and to the Chief Executive for the work you've done on this. I don't think city region is really a term that any of us would have chosen for ourselves in Gloucestershire. And it probably, you know, might frighten some people as some sort of stalking horse or some new kind of centralised form of local government in Gloucestershire. But I think the work you've done to adapt what is actually the language of government in city regions to a more streamlined approach to joint working in Gloucestershire, which is really what this is about. It's rationalising existing joint working into a more efficient process is very welcome. And particularly because reading through the report, you've obviously worked hard to put in clear safeguards and democratic accountability that safeguards this council's and Cheltenham's interest in this kind of joint working process. Particularly that principle that, in effect, no decision about us should be taken without us, and that any decision that affects a particular council has to be approved by that council. I think that's a really important principle that's in this report and is very clearly there in black and white. And also the fact that actually this looks to me more transparent than the previous combination of setups, that all the meetings will happen in public and will be minuted and will be reported back to this council. So I'd just like to say thank you for that. And although it is a slightly scary title, I think this is a positive step and a sensible and open and transparent rationalisation of work that's already going on.
Thank you, Councillor Horwood. Any other member? No. Can I see a show of hands then to approve the recommendations as they're set out? That's unanimous. Thank you all. So agenda item 6 of tonight's is the M5 Junction 10 improvements, and that's the report of Councillor Horwood.
Thank you again, Leader. This report relates to, as it clearly says, the improvements to M5 Junction 10, which we seem to have been waiting for years, if not decades. But the process is now speeding up and I hope proceeding towards a conclusion that will be very positive for Cheltenham, but also for other parts of Gloucestershire too. And as part of that development consent order process, there is going to be an examination in the same way that there are often examinations of major plans and planning appeals and so on. And that examination process will be largely in writing, but nevertheless it's important that it proceeds as fast as possible because we all want this to crack on. And so this report is just a technical report to note the update on the M5 Junction 10 process, but to delegate authority to the Director of Communities and Economic Development to take part in that development consent order process and examination on our behalf. And it delegates to her the power to respond formally on behalf of the Council and to make representations at the hearings and meetings of the examination process. And that will simply, there are no great political implications to that. It is simply to make the process a whole lot more streamlined and efficient. And we are completely joined up with our officers clearly on what we want out of this process. So I hope Cabinet will approve that scheme of delegation in this case. Thank you very much, Leader.
Any member, any comment? Councillor Atherstone.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you so much, Councillor Horwood, for bringing this report today and to the officers, and as my full support. The improvements around the M5 Junction 10 are really, really vitally important for all the housing development we have planned in the pipeline for West and North West Cheltenham, and we don't want anything slowing that down. So this is really, really great that it's going to be efficient and definitely speed up that process to getting where we need to be. So thank you.
I can't see anybody else indicate. Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, anything we can do to be streamlined as efficient as possible. Not only the housing allocations that we know are sort of being held up, you may say, by this lack of this Junction 10, but also the fact that the road network in that part of town, even without the new houses, is grinding to a halt. So it's a much needed improvement to the town, the Junction 10, has been for decades. So I really welcome the fact that we're being as efficient as possible with this delegation of the scheme. So thank you, Councillor Horwood.
If I could see a show of hands, please, to approve this report. Thank you very much. Our next report today is the award of rent support grants to the voluntary sector, and that's the report of Councillor Jeffreys.
Thank you, Leader. Colleagues, we've received an application for a rent support grant from the Gardens Gallery in Montpellier. The report sets out the levels of rent support that have been assessed and is proposed. Now, you can imagine supporting the voluntary and community organisations through the Council's sizeable property portfolio is one of my more pleasurable activities that I undertake in my area. So I'm really pleased to bring this report. I'm not going to go into the detail of the actual third sector rent support grant policy. I think colleagues have discussed that actual policy enough, and it's in the report if you need to refresh yourselves. What I'm going to mention is that when assessing some of these grant applications, especially with organisations that have had a long-standing presence in our town, sometimes, when the policy has been applied, the rent calculation assessed, and organisations aren't always necessarily prepared for a little bit of uplift in rent, however small that contribution is. So from time to time, when issues are raised or I'm contacted, I'll have an ongoing conversation, which I did in the case of the Gardens Gallery. Now, at their request in this conversation, and separate to the paper, there's some updates to their lease. This is obviously done through the property team, not as part of the rent support. Now, those updates will allow them to be able to operate slightly differently while still supporting up-and-coming artists and also the established artists. This will have I suppose, hopefully a beneficial commercial aspect for them to be able to obviously pay for that little bit of upkeep in that little uplift in rent. So, on your behalf, if you agree, colleagues, I've applied the additional 10% discretionary element of the policy as mentioned in the reports. So I trust colleagues will be able to support the recommendations as laid out. Thank you, Leader.
Any member want to comment? Councillor Horwood.
Thank you, Leader. I just want to welcome this report and just say what a fantastic gallery I think the Garden Gallery is. And I think we're really lucky to have such a fantastic little gallery in such a public space that does so much to support local art and local artists. And I say this as a member of the Cheltenham Art Club, and I aspire to one day get something, maybe even just a little small thing, on the walls of the Garden Gallery. So that in the Art Club's annual exhibition. But the fact that they are booked up so many months, I think possibly even years in advance, just shows how, 2 years in advance, the leader tells me, just shows what a popular and successful formula this is. And it's owes so much to volunteer effort and to local artists. I think it's a fantastic celebration of our talented creative community in Cheltenham. And so I very much welcome this report and the deal that the Cabinet member has done on their behalf. Thank you.
Councillor Atherstone.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, just to echo what Councillor Horwood just mentioned, it's really, really great that as a council we're able to support the gallery. It's absolutely fabulously located in the Montpellier Gardens, as you say, and just be able to give artists the opportunity to exhibit their work and to support artists in this way also adheres to our recently launched culture strategy. So it's really, really great that we can continue to support organisations like the Gardens Gallery with the rent support. So great.
I can't see any other member. If I go back a few years, I don't know, some of you will remember, others of you won't, but actually it was one of those bids when we put in a bid to the Heritage Lottery to upgrade the whole of Montpellier Park and pull down what was the old gym that I remember bopping around in with a bar as a young teenager. But it's, you know, which in itself was an institution, and that's what this has now become, is a real part of an institution. And it's, you know, and I mean, it was that fund that started that off. But I think one of the things I'd recognise as well with that organisation is actually how much they've done environmentally to make it sustainable, with all the improvements to the building that they've carried out as well. So that was just a couple of comments from me. But if everybody's happy to show support for this, please, I could see a show of hands. Thank you. So our final report tonight is the council tax premium on empty properties and second homes. And that's the report of Councillor Jeffreys. We'll call you back, Martin.
Thank you, Leader. Colleagues, with the continued housing crisis, this administration, as you know, uses all the tools at its disposal to do what it can to bring empty homes back into use. Utilising our discretionary powers to levy council tax on long-term empty properties is one such tool. The levels of premium and the current numbers of properties is shown at 2.3 in the report. Changes to the relevant acts of Parliament, and there's several, mean we can now, if colleagues are supportive of the recommendations, we can now charge this premium after a property has been empty for 1 year instead of 2. There's also a power afforded to us through these changes in that we can now charge a premium for second homes. Sadly, there's been some loopholes taken advantage of in relation to second homes. So, i.e. for long-term properties furnished, then it can be classed as a second home. That's circumnavigating, that's a very long word for this time of night, circumnavigating the empty homes premium. Currently, there are 963 properties classed as second homes. And whilst fully accepting that the majority of these are not long-term empty, the changes to legislation are welcomed in my view. And we should encourage all owners of second homes to consider freeing them up. You know, we have a homelessness crisis, we have a housing crisis. You know, maybe there'll be some homeowners there when they see this, they may think, actually, you know what, do I really need that second home? Taking this decision now means we will be prepared to be able to be proactive when the changes take effect as of April 2025. So empty homes and second homes do not positively contribute to the cohesion in our communities. So I'm pleased to present this report with the recommendations as laid out, Leader. Thank you.
Any member? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Leader. I have a question, just to really spice up the evening, because I have any questions. Yeah, I do like a good question. So, I mean, one thing I was thinking about when I was reading through this report, which I think, in general, is a fantastic report that will hopefully free up more properties on Cheltenham's rather challenging housing market. I know I've just bought one. Is the issue of, how to get it in there? Is the issue of people who, unfortunately, end up losing their family members and the property goes into probate, which I'm sure, as many of us are familiar with, having experienced it, can take a long time. And then once you finally get ownership of the property, you've got to find some time to get it sold or restored. Is there something within the plan of this policy to ensure that people who have just unfortunately lost family members aren't going to be penalised by this second home strategy?
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Well, it's ironic. It seems to be a regular pattern of the government. They make these announcements, and they've actually changed the legislation, but they haven't given us some of the detail. One of the things that we are not sure of yet are the exemptions. Having chatted with the officer, because it's come up several times, this particular point, having chatted with the relevant officer, they fully expect there'll be an exemption for such a case, so that council tax, and they wouldn't have to worry about that until end of probate. They're actually thinking, not sure, clearly depends on guidance from government. There may be a grace period of up to 6 months once probate's been granted, but clearly we'll have to wait, as we do regularly for the government, for those exemptions to come through. But taking decisions now mean that we'll be best placed to enact them in 2025. I hope that gives you the reassurance that you're sort of looking for without any reassurance from the government. Thank you.
Councillor Atherstone.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, so thank you, Councillor Jeffreys. Just to mention with regards to those exemptions, there will surely be sort of many reasons why somebody won't be able to perhaps sell a property straight away, or many different reasons why somebody might end up being the owner of a second property. And once we do know the direction of those exemptions, obviously that's going to be really, really helpful. But in terms of the new policy that's coming into place, we've got until, I think it was April 2025. So there's plenty of time for those that perhaps need a bit of encouragement to release that property so they can become a lovely home for a resident, for a different resident in Cheltenham. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Leader. I think it's a good report. It's not often I say positive things about the government, but I think it's generally a good thing that they've brought forward this legislation. It is not before time. We know that there is a massive housing crisis. We know that in Cheltenham we don't have enough houses, and that first-time buyers, the likes of Councillor Lewis and others who we meet from time to time, really struggle to get on the property ladder. So it's disappointing that there are those who have an abundance of homes and decide to leave them empty. And the table that we see in our report here shows that there are some people who have decided to leave their property empty for a really, really long time. And for me, this is a moral issue. Because we have too many people who are homeless, we have too many people who are hidden homeless, we have too many people who are struggling to move out of their parents' homes in their late 20s, 30s and sometimes even older, because they simply can't afford the rent. Now, this is something where people might be tempted to say, well, this is just the council squeezing the pips and trying to get loads of extra money, but actually if you look at the potential flow of extra revenue that we might get, it's not even enough money to buy a small flat in Cheltenham town centre. We're talking about less than £200,000 according to this report. But the important thing, as Councillor Atherstone alluded to, is that this is going to be a nudge, isn't it? It's going to be a prompt for people who might be tempted to leave their properties open or empty for a very long period of time, or to sit on a second home and not really use it properly. It's a prompt for them to do the right thing and bring it back into use for a young person, a family, someone who's hidden homeless, to use as their home. This is a really important thing that we must be embracing in this authority. I'm pleased that we're doing it, and I hope that the government will follow this action with more later.
Can't see any other member indicating. Councillor Jeffries, do you want to come back on anything that's been said? Therefore, could I just ask to see a show of hands to support the recommendations? Thank you very much. I'll just pause for a second while we get Councillor Horwood back. So the next section is a briefing session from Cabinet members. If I start with Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Leader. Top of the list, good news on the Lansdowne Artist Studios. There was a positive result in the Planning Committee, and it does look like we're going to be able to help those artists get from their current building, which is as part of the slightly dilapidated Lansdowne Industrial Estate, into a new and fit for the future building. They're going to need a little bit of extra help with some funding probably. This authority will need to do a bit of work with them to work out how they can make it pay. But we're on the right road, and I think it's going to be something that Cheltenham can view as sort of an exemplar case study for how you get good results for culture out of planning. And I'm proud of this authority's planning team that helped to make it happen. And indeed, I think that the developer who came forward with the scheme should be applauded for being open-minded on the matter of culture. So I just wanted to raise that. Secondly, on a related matter of culture, Councillor Took, Councillor for Pittville, and I visited the pump rooms earlier this week to see some of the work that's being done to make sure that we are properly maintaining one of the real jewels in the crown of this town's Regency heritage. And I'm pleased to say the work seems to be going very well, having seen it with my own eyes. I'd like to thank the organisers of the From the Ground Up event at Pip and Jim's Church. There was lots of really good stuff being mentioned there around what this town is doing to fight the climate emergency. And finally, I'd like to say thank you to Canada Life for a positive response to my letter which I sent them about the future of Cavendish House. It does look like there is a consensus emerging about the future of that building, which in the town centre has such a big role to play in our future.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you, Leader. Colleagues may not have passed you by. This is the normal meeting. We would agree the budget papers prior to the council meeting. You may also note in your diaries that there's another Cabinet meeting on the 23rd, before the Cabinet meeting, because, well, I think you all recognise the local authority funding crisis up and down the country. And there were some late announcements of some additional funding for local authorities. That gives a bit of a knock-on delay in terms of being able to process that information when we eventually got the detail from the government. So with that slight amendment to our timetable, you can look forward to your budget papers coming hit in your email inboxes soon, in preparation for our council meeting on the 23rd. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Clucas.
I don't normally go to the right, Leader. Just a few words to say about, and some of you will already know about it because I know, Leader, you were there. And that was the event we had at the Town Hall just over a week ago. No Child Left Behind award ceremony. And all I can say, Leader, is it was an event to warm the heart. Because at this event, which is, from the work that I've done around the country, is unique, is the belief that we can help our children to a good present and a better future. And we do that simply by enabling people who care in Cheltenham to give our children, the latest count is some 7,000 assistance, to give them opportunity, not just opportunity to do tick box education, but to experience something joyous, something that's fun, something that they can learn from, something that they can build from. And by doing so, Leader, we give them a belief that they too can succeed. And at the awards ceremony, we had representatives of almost 100 businesses and organisations in Cheltenham that have become an inherent part of what we do. We have people who give their time freely. I'm thinking of Camilla Lewington and Mr. Kai, our entertainers for the evening. I'm thinking of Pittville School that came and did a performance for us, and Lakeside that also did a performance. And I'm thinking of all those people who, while not at that event, Leader, nevertheless, as you will know because you were there, their love was an inherent part of what happened. And I want to say, through Gareth, our Chief Executive, thank you to all the officers who have worked so hard on this. This year will mark a change, because from now we are seeking to build No Child Left Behind, to create something even more unique, forgive my English, even more unique in this country and in this region, because we'll be seeking to grow, to enhance, to ensure that our children, you mentioned Golden Valley, Leader, have the opportunity to find work there. Not just go to university, tick a box, get a degree, and that's it. No, actually the potential to find out what it's like, to decide that they'd like to work there, to decide that this is something they want to do, and how they can then get the information, get the assistance, get the opportunity to work in that area. And so, Leader, thank you for attending the event. I hope that this time next year, we'll be telling you of how much we've actually been able to grow, to improve, to bring in more resources, and to enable our young people to have something which they haven't got anywhere else in the country. So thank you again, Leader, and thank you to all colleagues for their support, and to the officers for all the work that they've done.
Thank you, Councillor Clucas. Councillor Horwood.
Thank you, Leader. Two things. First of all, the consultation is now open on the strategic and local plan. This is the document that will replace in due course our own Cheltenham plan and the joint core strategy that we currently share with Tewkesbury and Gloucester. And it's very early days in this new process, but this is a really important part of the process, the first consultation. And ultimately, the strategic and local plan will shape the way we tackle climate change locally, the way we plan for housing and the kind of housing and where it should go that we want in the future, how we protect our green spaces, how we promote nature recovery, how we use planning to support local business and many other aspects of the way we shape our communities locally. So it's really important. I'd encourage colleagues and anybody watching online to go to haveyoursay.cheltenham.gov.uk, where there is a link to the SLP consultation website, and there is an interactive questionnaire which makes it quite accessible, I think, for anybody taking part. But you can also just send an email, and we're also doing some proactive engagement, especially with young people, to try and promote this consultation. So I'd encourage everyone to take part in that. The second thing is just to congratulate the Public Protection and Neighbourhood team on some recent work with a young tagger. Now, we have some wonderful street art in Cheltenham, but we also have some rather antisocial and often, well, usually illegal graffiti. And the neighbourhood team undertook a restorative justice exercise. Rather than put this young individual who's identified as a tagger in front of a magistrate like yourself, the team undertook this exercise where they spent a lot of time painting over with the appropriate materials some graffiti in the town centre east car park. And this was done in collaboration with the police. It's an alternative to a punitive approach. It's a much more creative and imaginative approach. And actually, the evidence shows that restorative justice works and that it can be much more effective in the long term in giving people a different perspective on the activities they've been undertaking. And I think it's a great piece of work by our neighbourhood team, who I know are also tackling a range of other antisocial behaviour, and particularly as Gold Cup Week looming, they're doing a huge amount of work on that as ever. And I'd just like to congratulate Louis Krog as the Public Protection Officer and Sam Robinson as the neighbourhood team leader, and the whole of the team on the work they do to tackle antisocial behaviour in Cheltenham. It's a really important part of this council's work, and they work really hard on it every year, and I'd like to put my thanks to them on the record. Thank you.
Councillor Dobie.
Leader, I wasn't sure whether you were going to say anything about the new community orchard in Warden Hill, but perhaps I may. So I'm really pleased that I took part in an event which is going to resound down the years, in that we have now planted a community orchard on Weaver's Field, which is in Warden Hill, actually on Warden Hill. And we did this in conjunction with the Cotswolds National Landscape, and in particular with a representative of the Gloucestershire Orchards Trust. Actually, we're rebuilding a community orchard there, or replanting one there, because there used to be one centuries ago. And indeed, this is the orchard which used to contain pears, which were called the Warden pear. And that's what Warden Hill is actually named after. So it's very satisfying to be planted again some fruit trees there in the site, in the area where the Warden Hill was named after. And we did this, led by my green team, the Parks and Gardens team, but with the active participation of 3 local schools. And to see the delight on the future generations of the people from Warden Hill actually planting those trees, knowing that as they grow, that orchard will grow, and that community will have a place where they can come together to celebrate trees. And I noticed, just looking at behind you, on the Cheltenham's own logo, as it were, there's a tree, and it gives me great pleasure to announce that now we're planting more trees here in the town, which will grow into the future and provide a community orchard which will be a place for celebration for the people of Warden Hill. So that's what I wanted to say.
Councillor Atherstone.
Thank you, Leader. Just two updates today. The first is as part of the plan to bring the services of Cheltenham Borough Homes back in-house. It's obviously really, really important that we went out to tenants to collect their really important and vital feedback. So the tenant consultation survey was launched, it was around sort of early December, and actually came to a close on Sunday, just gone. I'm really, really pleased. We were advised that if we were to achieve 10% response rate, that would be a really, really strong response rate, and actually we've gone above that. So I just want to say a huge thank you to every resident that has really made an effort in giving their thoughts to really help us shape the future services from Cheltenham Borough Homes and obviously from the Council Housing Services. So the second thing is that I would just like to mention that I have signed up to an annual fundraising event, which I really do not enjoy. And I do it because it's a really, really good reminder about how awful it is when you are sort of left to sleeping on the streets, rough on the streets. And I think it's really, really important that I can do as much as I can to support the work of Cheltenham YMCA and the amazing work that they do in providing support and housing for those that have become homeless, and to raise awareness because any one of us could become homeless. You never know what's around the corner. And actually, right now, across the country, we are really experiencing very, very high rates in terms of those making homelessness applications. So it's increased, I think, 20% in Cheltenham last year. So if anybody would like to visit Cheltenham YMCA website, they have a fundraising page, or if you'd like to share the links that they are promoting on social media, please do. It's really, really great to be able to support those most vulnerable residents here in Cheltenham. So thank you.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Leader. I only have one update, just to add to that really impressive lineup. It's always terrible being at the end because you're never quite as impressive as everybody else. But I would like to say a huge thank you to all of the small and medium businesses across Cheltenham who have applied for the Cheltenham Zero Business Fund. So for anybody who isn't familiar, we are going to be giving away 100 grand in small grants to small and medium businesses within the Cheltenham boundary who want to make changes to reduce their energy use and to switch to more sustainable sources of energy. We think it's a really exciting opportunity to foster innovation in Cheltenham, see where people can share their expertise, and generally it's an important step towards our pathway of getting Cheltenham net zero by 2030. Helpfully, or not helpfully, depending on how you see it, we have had £177,000 worth of applications. So I'm looking forward to sitting down with the panel and working out which grants we're going to be giving out, because we have only got that 100 grand. But there's some really impressive applications, and I think we're going to be giving money to some fantastic small and medium businesses. So it's always nice to be giving something away. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you all very much. It makes my little bit that I'm going to say now sort of quite small, because you're all doing really exciting things. I'm not saying that what I do is not exciting, but it's very different. There is some in terms of No Child Left Behind. I think it's worth. We had two major sponsors on that, but one of those time to actually make lots of phone calls to get all that corporate sponsorship into that fund to make that happen. So I think I really do want to say a big thanks to Mark Owen from Punchline, because that's an impressive commitment. And that's not taking it away from any of the other businesses that sponsored it, but somebody took on that organisation, which was needed. The other decision, I think we've moved on now to the decision making. Sorry, decisions of cabinet members for tonight. So there have been 5 this week. Or in this last, since we last met. So I've got several for Councillor Jeffries. Do you want to run through all your three at once, Councillor Jeffries?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'll do all three now, if that's okay. Colleagues, the first one relates to replacement fire alarm systems. So I accepted the tender for the successful contractor for the provision of these works. That was the first one. The second one was to, this is to award a contract to carry out external component repair, replacement and improvement energy efficiencies, decarbonisation in brackets, and associated works to council-owned properties. This is slightly nuanced, this decision, in terms of I accepted the tender, but obviously it's subject to final council ratification of the housing revenue account budget. And the third decision I took, Leader, was colleagues be aware that delegated to myself and the officers in relation to our council tax support scheme, who is obviously, depending on what the government set the income bands are, now those income bands have been set, to also took a decision to apply those income bands to the council tax support scheme. Thank you very much, Leader.
So the next decision, I took a decision as in terms of the appointment of an interim chief executive for Cheltenham Borough Homes that will take us through to the 23rd of February at full council. But it was important that we had that leadership at the top at the departure of the then existing chief executive. So we put in some temporary leadership in there. The last decision was Councillor Atherstone.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just want to say huge thank you to the officer for their brilliant work. I know it was a massive job in terms of the procurement exercise, and it was a really thorough report. And so I was really happy to approve the appointment of BDP as our lead designer, architect, master planning and landscape design consultants for our future development prospects for housing at Monkscroft, the old Monkscroft school site.
I'm going to take us back one step because I would like to just, I was going to do it in our member briefing, but I wasn't actually sure whether it was out in the public yet. But I'm very glad, and it just shows how important it is that we do work with our businesses locally to pull things together so that we're all, you know, singing from the same hymn book, really, if you like, or prayer book, whatever. But it, you know, so when Marks and Spencer's approached Cheltenham, the council late last week to say that they'd like a meeting with us to give us feedback on what their plans were for the sites that they own in this town. And it was a really positive, you know, yes, the shop's closing, but the food hall is going to be much bigger than it was. And then also the improvement that's generally going to be made on a very high performing town centre location of Marks and Spencer's. I know there's been some jest from some quarters of the fact that, well, Cavendish House is going, what next? Well, obviously Marks and Spencer's have decided that Cheltenham's the place to be because they're investing heavily in it. And also there is no loss of jobs. Some will be redeployed temporarily whilst the shops are being refitted. But all in all, it's a really positive story because it just shows how Cheltenham is punching above its weight and more than holding its own in its high street, unlike many other towns and cities. Yes, we do have empty shops, but far less than a great many others. So it's a really good way of working with businesses when you can have that positive interaction with them. That was, I wasn't sure, as I said, whether it was in public as yet. That's it in terms of decisions. There are no other items that I consider are urgent. So at 6:55, I will call the meeting to a close and